There is one character inside the FNAF universe that is arguably the most important, besides William Afton. This character is Edwin Murray. While playing a seemingly small role in the overall story, he did something that will impact the timeline forever, even after his death. You see, Edwin was the man who created the Mimic, a killer AI robot that lurks in the shadows of the Pizzaplex. But Edwin didn't create this killer robot out of pure innovation. The Mimic and its evil mind had been created out of tragedy. This is the full story of Edwin Murray. From very early on in Edwin's life, he was fascinated with machines. At just the age of 4, he began taking apart his mother's small appliances to see how they worked. To his mother's surprise, he was able to put them back together. Children are most curious at a young age. Everything about the world is new to them. Edwin's curiosity came from how things worked. So over the years, he would continue to explore machines. By the time Edwin was 8 years old, he knew he wanted to build machines that would change people's lives. Little did he know, one of these machines would not only change lives, but take them. You see, Edwin believed that he could make living better if humans didn't need to complete the mundane tasks of everyday life. That being said, Edwin decided he could create robots that would do most of the mundane household chores. With this goal in mind, Edwin would continue through his years of school. Sometime around his senior year of college, Edwin would find something that he wasn't looking for. Edwin found love. He met another student named Fiona. They would instantly fall in love, and as soon as they both graduated, they got married. As she said herself, she fell in love with his mustache. Life was going well for the couple, so Edwin finally decided to start his own robotics business called Murray Co. With it, he would build robotic vacuum cleaners that would take care of those mundane tasks of everyday life. He would even receive his first patent for this creation, and it ended up being very successful. People loved these vacuum cleaners. With money rolling in from the sales, the couple decided to take the next step and buy an abandoned lace factory for Edwin's business, as well as an old mansion. They planned to restore both the home and the factory. Edwin and Fiona were happy, so naturally they decided to start a family. Fiona would get pregnant with a baby boy. This boy's name was David. For Edwin, he'd have a legacy, someone to pass his life's work on to. However, while life was at its peak for the Murray family, tragedy struck, and Fiona would pass away, giving birth to their boy. The passing of his wife left Edwin devastated and alone. He had no choice but to take care of David on his own. A single father, happy for the life he created, but sad for the life he lost. Edwin had mixed emotions. Life was now a challenge, and this wasn't the one he wanted to live. So he would need to take time away from his robotics work and focus on raising David. Taking care of a child alone was difficult, but not impossible. Edwin would slowly start to work again, but robotic vacuum cleaners did not have the longevity customers expected, and complaints began to roll in. Juggling a business while raising a child brought newfound challenges for Edwin. David needed constant attention, so the business began to fail. On top of this, Edwin couldn't manage both properties alone, so he had to sell the house and move him and David into the factory. That being said, he was able to convert parts of said factory into living areas. So this factory would now house Edwin and David as well as his robotics business. Obviously, a 5,000 square foot factory wasn't the safest spot for a young child to play, so Edwin would continue to make adjustments and changes for David's sake. He created a wooden white tiger bed which mimicked one of David's favorite toys, a plush tiger named Tiger. Edwin found a slide and bolted it to a wall between the first and second floor, and placed a mattress at the bottom. This gave David a fun little slide to play on. Edwin and David would also play catch in the factory's vacant gravel lot. The father and son were making the most out of what they had. As long as David was happy, Edwin was happy. Now, the complexity of Edwin's machines required countless hours of work, as well as expensive parts and tools. This, along with raising David alone, left Edwin in a very tough spot. His finances would begin to run dry, so Edwin decided the best choice for him and his son would be to sell his company. But who would ever want a robotics company that made things like vacuum cleaners? Well, there was one company. Fazbear Enterprises. The deal was they would buy Edwin's company and he would work for them. They realized Edwin was very talented in his craft, so why not take advantage of this? The buyout gave Edwin some money in his pocket as well as a steady job. The job in question, building animatronic endoskeletons and attaching them to the costumes that Fazbear provides. Years would pass as Edwin had created up to 18 animatronic endoskeletons. Life with a now 4-year-old David seemed to be going well. Except one day, David interrupts his father's work. Being a hyper 4-year-old, he accidentally damages the animatronic's head, making Edwin frustrated. Although he understands that David is just a kid, but realizes this might be a bigger issue in the future. Fragile animatronics are not exactly safe for a growing boy. So Edwin ponders the idea of creating a robot to help care for his son. With the help of a robot, Edwin could focus on more of his work. After seeing how the bed he made for David mimicked his favorite toy, this idea grew even bigger. So for the next 22 days, Edwin works non-stop on this idea using parts from machinery around the factory. He created an endoskeleton with a torso, arms, and a head. For its programming, Edwin used a combination of Pascal and C code to create a thinking mind that would learn from mimicking what it observes. Edwin got this idea from how David's bed was built to mimic Tiger, David's favorite plush toy. So he decided to name it Mimic, after the name of its program, Mimic 1. When first turned on, the endo starts to mimic David's behaviors. Realizing how it works, David begins to play with it and teaches Mimic how to play games like Patty Cake. Over the next 2 weeks, David teaches Mimic more and more. Because Mimic cannot speak, David shows it special hand movements to communicate. Edwin was impressed by how fast Mimic was learning. He would continue to tinker with Mimic so it could move faster and keep up with David. Edwin even considered using the Mimic 1 program to help restart his company. Now, while Edwin works, David and Mimic spend all of their time together, doing kid activities like coloring and tossing a ball around. David would often carry his tiger plush with him, causing Mimic to curve his arm in a way that suggested he has his own. He was mimicking David. So David and Mimic worked together to create a makeshift tiger plush out of lace and string. This gave Mimic its own toy. Edwin was amazed that Mimic was not only mimicking, but it was also responding. So he felt more confident in leaving David in Mimic's care. Since David was spending all of its time with Mimic, Edwin could focus more on his work. One day, Edwin finds construction paper for them to draw on, and over the next 2 days, they make odd drawings surrounded by strange markings, which David said was all made up. This was odd, but Edwin shrugs it off as David's imagination. Edwin would continue to tinker with Mimic, making it more and more fluid. However, just as things were looking up for the Murray family, once again, tragedy struck. One morning, as Edwin was making breakfast, David went outside to play. But in that moment, something felt off to Edwin. The factory's front doors were open and a chill ran down Edwin's spine. He ran out the door to watch his son chase after a ball that bounced onto the road. The world around Edwin began to blur. The roar of an engine, the smell of exhaust, the screech of tires, and a thud. Then screaming. David was hit by a van and would pass away in his father's arms. For the next 2 weeks, Edwin was lost in a void of despair. His world was just taken from him, and the only thing he had left was the Mimic that acted like his son. The Mimic would do things that David would do, like use David's toys and make gestures asking for things like ice cream. Seeing the Mimic behave like his son overwhelmed Edwin with anger and guilt. Edwin wanted to destroy himself, but he couldn't. So he took this anger out on the Mimic by battering him with a metal rod. All of Edwin's self-hatred fueled each swing he unleashed on the Mimic. Edwin could feel his murderous thoughts pouring through his muscles and transferring through the metal rod into the Mimic system. While being beaten, the Mimic was learning new angered behaviors. Eventually, Edwin runs out of strength and his anger turns to regret as he cries over the Mimic and runs away, abandoning the Mimic and the rest of his work. Shortly after, Edwin's property is given to Fazbear Entertainment due to him abandoning everything. What Fazbear doesn't know is that the Mimic is still inside the factory, sitting in the shadows with its last known memory of pure violence. Unbeknownst to him, Edwin had just created not a friendly endoskeleton, but a killing machine. Over the next 40 years, Edwin Murray would make no contact with Fazbear Entertainment. He was a ghost to them. However, he would eventually run out of money and was forced to return, demanding that Fazbear Enterprises honor their buyout agreement. They still owed Edwin money after buying his company. Instead of paying him the money up front, they decided to hire Edwin and place him on the board of directors for the company. With no money for lawyers, Edwin didn't exactly have a choice, so he would now be working for Fazbear Enterprises once again. However, most of the board did not treat Edwin with respect, especially Mr. Burroughs, the head chairman. The Mega Pizzaplex was now completed, although it wasn't making enough money as they hoped with its current setup. So Mr. Burroughs decided to introduce something new that would supposedly fix the financial issues. The plan was to downsize the creative department and instead use an automated process. They would create a computer program that combined various tropes and characters to come up with stories. They wouldn't have to pay employees to make up ideas when the program could do it for free. This program was called the Storyteller. Once Edwin was informed about this program, he immediately objected because he knew what could happen if a program developed a mind of its own. But Mr. Burroughs ignored him and moved forward with it. Edwin was a consultant for this project, meaning he was supposed to have a say on what story elements would be programmed into the Storyteller. But he was always ignored. The only suggestion the members listened to from Edwin was the design of the program. It would live inside a massive artificial baobab tree that sits in the middle of the Pizzaplex, including wires that stretch all over the venues within the building. Now, Edwin was not allowed to see inside the tree's trunk, which housed the program. He confronted Mr. Burroughs about this, but was told only the construction crew was allowed inside. Determined to find a way in, he scavenges for memos and discovers that the larger parts of the Storyteller were being transferred into the tree's trunk on a Thursday night. So Edwin sneaks through the loading dock and hides in Monty's Gator Golf. The sight of what's being carried into the tree gives Edwin flashbacks to his son David's death and triggers a panic attack. He watches as three men carry a large, white animatronic tiger into the tree, the same tiger his son used to play with. The next day, Edwin confronts Mr. Burroughs and asks what program is being used to create the Storyteller stories, but gets a vague answer and decides he needs to see the program for himself. He also notices the animatronics that are connected to the Storyteller program start to portray kid-like behaviors. So, after finally finding a way inside, Edwin enters the Storyteller tree for the first time. He witnesses a large white metal tiger head, with mismatching eyes and four arms emerging from its neck. This gives Edwin another panic attack, but he calms himself and finds a small inset on the wall with a compact computer terminal. The start screen tells him his worst fears are true. The Storyteller is running the Mimic 1 program, the same program Edwin created for the Mimic. For the next 5 nights, Edwin continues to sneak into the tree with large sheets of construction paper and an array of colors. Using a plain black marker, Edwin covers each sheet with odd stick drawings and strange symbols, as well as the words, "I'm sorry." These are the same symbols David drew with the Mimic all those years ago. He then sticks these papers on the interior of the tree's trunk. All of the past memories of David and the Mimic flood Edwin's mind as he slowly slips into the void once again. Edwin couldn't believe that the Mimic 1 program was back. The next day, Mr. Burroughs notices glitching in the animatronics and thinks Edwin is to blame. The Mimic 1 program was causing the animatronics to act out, so he waits to catch Edwin as he enters inside the Storyteller and locks him in. The interior of the tree was airtight. It was kept like this in order to maintain the optimal conditions for the Storyteller's processors. So with no ventilation system, Edwin had limited oxygen. A week would pass by, and Mr. Burroughs suspected that Edwin was getting in and out of the tree using a different method, but that wasn't the case. Upon entering, Mr. Burroughs found Edwin's lifeless body underneath the construction paper with the strange symbols and the text, "I'm sorry." Edwin Murray's life ended inside the storyteller tree. This was a tragic full circle moment after all those years. He was devastated to see that the very program he created, Mimic 1, was powering the storyteller. This caused him to fill with grief and sorrow, as Mimic was the last known resemblance of his son. The symbols he wrote on the paper were an attempt to apologize to David. It's a story of true tragedy. Edwin was a man who lost everything that was close to him, and because of this, he unknowingly created a monster. That was the entire story of Edwin Murray. With Secret of the Mimic coming out soon, I wanted to explore the man that created the Mimic. Considering how tragic it is, I felt it would make for a good video. So let me know your thoughts in the comments below, and if you like horror game content like this, please consider subscribing. Also, I have a Discord server, so if you want to chat with me, I recommend joining. And if you want to support the channel more, you can become a member. Don't forget to follow my Twitter at TerrifiedT. Thanks for watching.